During the Civil Rights Movement, we saw the culmination of Black unity as millions of those who came before us united behind a message of hope, change, and unity. Families were at their peak of solidarity. So what happened? What happened is the greatest con artist scheme ever concocted. The feminist movement turned from supporting women's rights for equality into a movement to turn women against men, plain and simply, to destroy the unity the civil rights movement had created. Realizing this truth is the start of an amazing transition. So how did it happen? Beginning in the 1960s and the 1970s, the women's rights movement changed from a fight for equal rights into what was called, and continues to be called, feminism. All of you are aware that any word that ends with ism tends to be negative. It is a belief system that typically holds one group superior and above another. Nazism, racism, egotism. All of these have negative connotations, and feminism is the same. Now, the reason I want to talk to you guys about this is because a lot of us don't realize how feminism robbed us of a beautiful, beautiful connection that was found during the women's rights movement and the civil rights movement, when men and women stood together for the betterment of the entire community, not just one group. In the 1970s, the belief system started to be focused on separating women and men. They did this by proclaiming that any woman who was a housewife or who took care of home or who was connected in respect to a man was being oppressed. The media was consumed by these horrific messages claiming that men are oppressing women in the home, that if you are a wife and mother, you are oppressed and not being allowed to achieve your dreams and your full potential. This became, the entire nation became consumed by this belief. So what took place in the 1970s and 1980s as a result was that the divorce rates spiked, out-of-wedlock births spiked, as there was no longer any accountability for abandoning a family, for a woman to break apart her family. There was no longer any backlash for a woman having an out-of-wedlock child. There was no shame in it any longer. You could not tell a woman that she had made a mistake. You could not look down at a woman and say that she had made a mistake. Feminism went from women's rights to proclaiming that a woman no longer has to be accountable for the mistakes that she makes. So in the 1970s and the 1980s, we saw an drastic increase in the number of broken homes, single-parent homes, and mixed families, as far as two single parents coming together and combining their families. This created a generation in the 1970s and 1980s who became accustomed to the idea of the broken family. This was what they were raised in. I'm one of those children. I was born in the early 80s, and I know the effects of it. We grew up in a family unit that was already broken apart. Many of us were raised by the mothers as women. We were raised to believe that we needed to be independent of a man. A man could not be relied upon, even though feminism was the one that had told them they didn't need a man. And by virtue of teaching these women they didn't need a man, they created the situation where they did not have a man, or where they pushed the man away. But, once again, the lack of accountability. The feminist movement taught women that they did not have to have a man in their home, that it was not necessary, thus making the family unit as a whole no longer valuable to them. So, instead of teaching the accountability, saying that they chose to leave, they instead turned it on the men, saying that, no, it was the men's fault. We didn't want to be oppressed any longer, and the men couldn't take it and walked away. And that is not at all the case. Many of the fathers of this age group, if you speak to them, felt distant from their children. They felt pain, they felt heartbreak. But to deal with the mother who was constantly berating them and abusing them in front of the children, to be emasculated in front of their children, it was too much for their egos to take in most instances. And so that is why they didn't fight more than they did. Regardless of that fact, this is why the 1970s and 1980s you found so many children growing up in a home without their fathers. Let's move forward a little bit into the 1990s and the year 2000 onward. The children of the 70s and 80s began having children themselves. This became the second generation in which out-of-wedlock births, divorces, and such were rapidly increasing. Now we officially have two generations who were raised in a world consumed by divorce, consumed by a lack of respect for the family unit, and consumed by media bashing the men, telling a woman that she cannot rely on her man, telling a child that they cannot rely on their father. What is the end goal of all of this? Creating subservience to the system, believing that the system is the only one that can liberate you. The funny thing is, even though we say that these leaders in this system is seeking to separate us, I don't think the people in the leadership even understand what they're taking on. They think that they are creating a world that they can more easily control, when in actuality, what's going to end up happening is, because they've destroyed the family, they're going to destroy the civilization they think that they're protecting. This civilization is going to erupt. There is no other end result. So what has happened is now the family is no longer valued. So what can we do? I don't believe in just talking about the problems. I always believe in following it up with solutions. What can we do as the future leaders of the world? We are the children born in the 70s and the 80s. We know what we were robbed of. We witnessed our grandparents' unions lasting 40, 50, and 60 years sometimes. We saw this, and we know that it's possible. We are the last generation who witnessed strong family bonds through our grandparents. If we don't make a change now, if we don't make this decision now in our generation, it will be lost. Our children have not seen this. They don't know what it's like to have a long-term marriage, a strong family, and a strong couple who stands by each other. They don't know what it looks like, but we do. Let us not lose this vision. Let us not let down our grandparents. They left us a legacy of unity, and it is our turn to step up and take it back. All we have to do is refuse to be controlled. All we have to do is choose to value family, to choose to respect each other as men and women. And ladies, a lot of time this is harder for us because we have been so miseducated over the years. There is so much that they have told us that really truly is not true. And the reason I say this is because I have seen the pain in the eyes of the men that I am friends with. I've seen the hurt and the anguish. I have witnessed my own cousins going through custody battles with children that they desperately want in their lives. Both of these young men married the mother, wanting to create a home for their child. And what did the woman do? In both instances, they filed for divorce. And my cousins were doing everything as a man to improve the life of this woman and the child, to create a safe and happy home. But yet these women preferred to live on alimony and child support, stripping their child of the father they created them with, believing that the family was not that important, but that their individual freedom was more important. Ladies, let's not make that mistake. Let us give to our children what was not given to us. Let us give them a united family, a mother and a father and a child. We can take back what we've lost if we choose to.